The 3rd of April 2025, let's take a look at the headlines making waves in Nigeria today. We start with the Punch newspaper. The leading story: Why Tinubu sacked Kyari, NNPCL board says officials. President asks Ojulari-led 11-man new board to achieve 3 million barrel per day crude output, $60 billion investment. You can find the complete story on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. Above the leading story from the right, Edo poll, Ighodalo heads for appeal court as tribunal affirms Okpebholo government. You can find the complete story on page 2 of the Punch newspaper. NNPCL raises petrol pump price to 950 naira per litre. You can find the complete story on page 34 of the Punch newspaper. Moving over to the next newspaper, The Vanguard, the leading story: Edo, Okpebholo wins as tribunal, Ighodalo heads to appeal court. You can find the complete story on page 5 of the Vanguard newspaper. Above the leading story from the left, Vanguard economic discourse: Inflation, exchange rate volatility, others pose significant risk, says Kale. You can find the complete story on page 19 of the Vanguard newspaper. Tinubu jets out to Paris on 14-day working visit. You can find the complete story on page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper. Federal government boosts power generation by 2,000 megawatts in 2 years, says Minister. You can find the complete story on page 9 of the Vanguard newspaper. More heads to roll in NNPCL subsidiaries as Ojulari assumes duty. You can find the complete story on page 20 of the Vanguard newspaper. Below the leading story from the right, Uromi killings, residents allege indiscriminate arrest, extortion. You can find the complete story on page 8 of the Vanguard newspaper. Gridlock, federal government reopens Independence Bridge as Lagosians spend hours in gridlock. You can find the complete story on page 7 of the Vanguard newspaper. 2026 World Cup qualifiers: Bafana may escape FIFA sanctions, says attorney. You can find the complete story on page 30 of the Vanguard newspaper. Moving over to the next newspaper, The Daily Trust, the leading story: Turji, haunted by military, kills 11 farmers in Sokoto. You can find the complete story on page 3 and 4 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Above the leading story from the left, Sultan to governors treat all Nigerians as indigents. You can find the complete story on page 9 of the Daily Trust newspaper. General Siga regains freedom after 56 days in captivity. You can find the complete story on page 5 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Tinubu, Buhari, others mourn as Galadiman Kano buried. You can find the complete story on page 6 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Below the leading story, Why Tinubu sacked Kyari, dissolved NNPCL board. You can find the complete story on page 22, 23, and 24 of the Daily Trust newspaper. Moving over to the next newspaper, the Nigerian Tribune. NNPCL shake-up. Mixed reactions trail Kyari's removal, appointment of Ojulari Kida. You can find the complete story on page 6 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Okpebholo floors PDP. AA, AP as tribunal dismisses petitions against its election. You can find the complete story on page 3 of the Tribune newspaper. Moving over to the next newspaper, The Guardian, the leading story: Ighodalo rejects verdict, Okpebholo's olive branch heads to appeal court. You can find the complete story on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. Above the leading story from the left, Tinubu turns to technocrats for higher oil production, asset maximization. You can find the complete story on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. Trump slams 14% tariff on Nigerian exports. You can find the complete story on page 2 of the Guardian newspaper. Barau assures justice for 16 slain hunters, donates 60 million naira to families. You can find the complete story on page 30 of the Guardian newspaper. I can't steal to please you, Niger lawmaker tells constituent. You can find the complete story on page 30 of the Guardian newspaper. These are the headlines making waves in Nigeria today. If any of these headlines caught your attention, do get a copy of the paper and read the complete story.
Visit Housing TV Africa on YouTube and click on the subscribe button. Subscribe to Housing TV Africa to stay updated on latest happenings in Nigeria's housing sector. Follow our social media pages, like and share our posts. On Facebook, Housing TV Africa. On Twitter, Housing TV Africa. Instagram, Housing TV Africa.
Housing TV Africa, your first in housing development broadcasting.